The question that shook the council. The great hall of the Galactic Council glowed with cold silver light, enormous banners of alien empires hanging from every wall. Hundreds of voices whispered in 100 different tongues, yet all spoke of the same question. It was a question so dangerous, so unsettling, that even the bravest leaders struggled to speak it aloud. Why were humans never attacked? The council gathered on a high platform that overlooked billions of lives spread across the stars. Rulers of proud empires sat in jeweled chairs, their eyes glowing with suspicion. Beside them, generals with scarred faces leaned forward, their claws or tentacles gripping the edges of their desks. The question had burned in their minds for centuries, but now it demanded an answer. A tall reptilian warlord slammed his fist on the table. His scales were dark as obsidian, and his eyes burned with frustration. "Every empire has tasted war," he growled. The Karen fought the Vera, the Trell fought the Zor, but one species remains untouched. Humans. Why is that? What power do they hold? Why does no one dare to strike them? The chamber erupted into noise. Dozens of counselors shouted, some claiming humans had secret weapons, others swearing it was superstition. The noise grew so loud that the high speaker, an ancient being with skin like carved stone, raised his staff and thunder rolled through the hall. The voices fell silent. The high speaker's voice was slow and heavy. For thousands of years, wars have scarred this galaxy. Yet humans have walked through the flames unharmed. This mystery cannot remain. It is time we ask, what truth hides behind their safety? A nervous ambassador from a minor world rose from his chair. His thin hands trembled as he spoke. "Honored Council, it is said humans are cursed. Some whisper that those who attack them vanish without trace. I beg you, let us not chase this question. Perhaps ignorance is safer than truth." Murmurs spread like wildfire. Cursed, vanish, whispers. The words struck fear even in the most battle-hardened leaders. Still, pride burned brighter than fear, for how could mighty empires admit they feared a species as young as humanity? Another counselor, a winged matriarch with feathers like liquid gold, rose with defiance in her eyes. "Fear blinds you all," she declared. "Humans are nothing special. They build ships, they fight, they bleed. They are fragile as any other race. If they are untouched, then it is because someone, somewhere, protects them. We must find who or what stands behind them." The chamber buzzed again. Theories clashed like swords. Some claimed humans were allied with hidden gods. Others believed humans carried forbidden weapons lost from an ancient war. A few whispered the unthinkable, that humans themselves were the weapon. The high speaker listened, his stone-like face unreadable. Finally, he spoke once more. "Then it is decided. We cannot allow rumors to guide our galaxy. We must seek the truth. We will send envoys, watchers and spies. They will study humans in secret. They will learn why no blade dares touch them." The decision sent a shiver through the chamber. Some were eager, some were terrified, but none could resist the weight of the order. As the council meeting ended, shadows seemed to crawl along the walls, as if the galaxy itself did not wish for this question to be asked. Outside the hall, whispers spread through corridors and across worlds. Soldiers muttered in taverns, merchants whispered in markets, scientists argued in laboratories. Why are humans never targeted? The question grew louder, echoing through every star system. Some laughed at it, calling it a myth. Others grew silent, their faces pale. For they had heard stories. Fleets disappearing in the dark, armies broken without a sound, predators running from a single human gaze. On a distant colony world, a young alien child asked her mother, "Why do pirates run from humans?" The mother pulled her child close, whispering, "Because something walks with them, something unseen." Then she hushed, as if speaking more would invite doom. Back in the great hall, the high speaker sat alone after all had left. His ancient eyes stared into the dark. He had lived long enough to see patterns no one else dared notice. He remembered battles where human soldiers stood against forces 10 times their size. He remembered enemies who never returned. He remembered silence that followed every attempt to harm them, and though he had spoken of truth and investigation, deep in his heart he feared the answer, for he knew that some truths were not meant to be uncovered. The torches of the council hall dimmed. The banners of the empires seemed to flutter in an unseen wind. The galaxy held its breath, for the question had been spoken, and questions once spoken demand an answer. The first investigation. The order of the council spread across the galaxy like a whisper carried by cosmic winds. Envoys, spies, and scholars were quietly selected from many empires. They were sworn to secrecy, for if common citizens learned that the council was truly afraid of humans, it would shatter the delicate balance of power. Their task was simple in words but heavy in meaning. They were to watch humanity, live among them if possible, and discover the hidden truth that kept every pirate. Warlord and empire at bay. Among the chosen was Serath, a scholar from the Trell Dominion. His 4 eyes were sharp with curiosity, and his long fingers twitched with nervous excitement as he prepared for the mission. He had studied hundreds of alien cultures, written volumes on war and diplomacy, but humans had always been the great mystery that eluded him. For centuries, his people had logged their travels and encounters, yet the entries about humanity were curiously thin, always vague, always unfinished. Now, at last, he would see for himself. Serath was not alone. With him traveled an armored warrior from the Vera clans, a cloaked diplomat of the Avian Kirai, and 2 silent operatives whose names were never spoken aloud. Together they boarded a discreet vessel and set their course for the outer human colonies. These were the frontier settlements where humans were said to live without fear, farming their lands, building their cities, and walking beneath alien suns with a strange confidence that few others dared. The journey was tense. The Veri warrior scoffed at the mission, claiming humans were nothing but lucky. "Luck ends," he said in his growling voice, "and when it ends, we will see them fall like all others." The Kirai diplomat disagreed, insisting that whispers of human mystery were too persistent to be ignored. The 2 operatives remained silent, their unreadable faces hidden beneath dark visors. Only Serath listened, recording every word. Knowing that truth often revealed itself in disagreements, after weeks of travel, their ship slipped into orbit above a human farming world. It was not a fortress or a heavily armed colony as they expected. Instead, it was a place of open fields, forests, and rivers, with small settlements where human families lived in peace. From the observation deck, the envoys saw children running through the fields, adults tending to crops, and traders walking the streets with laughter. There were no heavy defenses, no massive fleets in orbit, just a handful of patrol craft. It looked ordinary, fragile even. Yet, as the envoys landed and walked among the humans disguised as traders, unease grew within them. They saw the smiles of human children, the firm handshakes of their workers, the laughter that echoed even in harsh labor. Humans greeted strangers without suspicion. They shared food with travelers, guided lost wanderers, and spoke of friendship as if it were a currency more valuable than gold. It should have made them appear weak, yet strangely it did not. On the 2nd week of their stay, an event occurred that changed everything. A pirate fleet slipped out of hyperspace on the edge of the system. It was a notorious band that had raided dozens of worlds, leaving fire and ruin behind. Their ships, dark and jagged, carried the mark of fear wherever they went. The envoys braced themselves for panic, expecting the human colony to sound alarms, to scatter in terror, to prepare for slaughter, but nothing of the sort happened. The human patrol craft moved to intercept, yet they did not fire a single shot. Instead, a calm voice was broadcast across the void, a simple human greeting, welcoming the pirates and offering peaceful negotiation. The pirates did not respond. They advanced closer, their weapons armed, their ships glowing with the promise of violence. Then something impossible occurred. The pirate fleet stopped. Without reason, without warning, the ships turned as if struck by unseen force. No shots had been fired, no threat had been made, and yet the fleet pulled away, retreating into hyperspace faster than they had arrived. The entire attack ended before it even began, leaving behind only confusion. The envoys watched in stunned silence. The Vera warrior cursed under his breath. Unable to comprehend why bloodthirsty raiders would flee without battle, the Kirai diplomat whispered, "They feared something, not ships, not weapons, but something else." Sarath's hands shook as he recorded the event. He replayed the sensor data again and again, searching for signals, hidden fleets, secret defenses, but there was nothing. The humans carried on with their lives as though nothing unusual had happened. Children continued to play, farmers continued to work, and the colony continued in its simple rhythm. At night, Sarath walked through the colony streets. Humans gathered around fires, singing songs in strange but soothing tones. He felt something stir inside him, a strange warmth, a sense of belonging he had never felt even among his own kind. He noticed how the humans carried themselves, unafraid of the dark sky above. Unafraid of shadows that might hide enemies, they spoke of tomorrow with hope, as though tomorrow itself had sworn loyalty to them. The scholar's mind wrestled with the truth. Were humans truly protected by some hidden force, or was it something within them that turned fear into strength? He did not know, but he felt certain of one thing. The galaxy's predators did not flee from weapons or from fleets. They fled from the humans themselves. When the envoys sent their first report back to the Council, they did not know what to write. Facts were simple enough. A pirate fleet approached, then fled. No battle took place, no casualties, yet between the lines of those facts lay a terror greater than any weapon, a terror that could not be explained. The report ended with a question rather than an answer, a question that burned hotter than before. What do the pirates see when they face humans? The Council, far away in their grand chamber, received the message with cold silence. Already whispers began to grow sharper. Already doubts began to turn into fear. The search for truth had only begun, but it was clear that whatever truth awaited them, it would not bring peace. It would only bring more questions. And so the galaxy leaned closer, watching humanity with uneasy eyes. For the mystery that had kept them safe for so long had not weakened. It had only grown stronger. Whispers in the void. The envoys returned to their ship with heavy silence pressing down on them. The pirate retreat had left no explanation, no data, no logic to guide them. Sarath reviewed the recordings until his eyes ached, but the sensors told him only what he already knew. The pirates had fled without a reason. The Vera warrior sharpened his blades with restless growls, muttering that he would rather face humans in battle himself than accept this insult to reason. The Kirai diplomat prayed in whispers, her golden feathers trembling as she repeated the same phrase again and again. They are not alone. They are never alone. The Council demanded further answers. And so the mission was extended. The envoys were ordered to leave the colony and search among the stars for those who knew the truth. They set their course toward the lawless systems, the regions where smugglers and mercenaries gathered like vultures. If there was knowledge about humanity's hidden power, it would be whispered in the shadows of the void. Their first destination was the free station of Korthal, a place where honesty was a rare currency and lies were cheaper than air. The station floated in orbit around a dying star, its hull scarred by battles and patched by rusting metal. Inside, the air smelled of oil, smoke, and fear. Aliens of every shape and size filled the halls. Some carried weapons openly. Others carried secrets more dangerous than blades. The envoys split their search. Sarath moved among traders and information brokers. The Vera warrior stalked through fighting arenas, and the Kirai diplomat listened in the gambling halls. All carried the same question, asked carefully, whispered cautiously. Why do no fleets strike at humanity? Why do pirates turn away? What do they fear? At first, they received only laughter. Merchants called it superstition, gamblers said it was luck, and thieves claimed it was bribery. Yet, beneath the mocking voices, the envoys saw the nervous eyes, the twitching hands, the forced smiles of those who dared not say more. They pressed harder, offering credits, offering favors, until finally a pattern began to emerge. Every story was the same, spoken in different words but always carrying the same warning. Do not strike at humans. Do not raid their worlds. Do not test their patience. Those who had tried never returned. Fleets vanished, crews were found dead with no wounds, ships drifted back empty, mines broken. The stories were fragments, half-truths perhaps, but every fragment pointed to the same conclusion. One night in the station's darkest corner, Serath met an old warlord whose skin was scarred with burns and whose eye was a cold, empty socket. He sat alone, drinking a bitter liquid from a cracked glass. When Serath approached and asked about humans, the warlord slammed his glass down and laughed bitterly. "You want to know why we do not touch them," he rasped. "I will tell you. But you will wish you had not asked." The warlord's voice dropped to a whisper, his words thick with fear. "I once led a fleet, 50 ships strong. We cornered a human convoy near the edge of the Perseus Arm. They had only 3 ships, fragile transports with little defense. We fired the first shot, and that was when it began. The void changed, the stars dimmed, and shadows spread like fire across the darkness. I saw things moving outside the hull, things that were not ships, not creatures, not anything I could name. My crew screamed, some tore at their eyes, some begged for mercy. By the time I gave the order to retreat, it was already too late. Only one of my ships survived. And I have never commanded again." His hand shook as he lifted the glass to his lips, spilling half of it across the table. "Do not ask again," he said, "for you will not want the answer." The Vera warrior called him a coward, mocking the tale as madness. But Serath saw the truth in the old warlord's broken gaze. This was no lie told for credits. This was memory carved into a soul. And as Serath turned to leave, he felt a chill crawl along his spine, as though unseen eyes watched him through the void. The Karai diplomat returned with her own story. She had spoken to a smuggler who once carried contraband near human space. The smuggler swore that when his ship crossed too close to a human patrol, his sensors filled with signals of impossible size. Vast forms moving in the dark, he escaped only by chance. And he vowed never to fly near humans again. "They walk with shadows," the smuggler had said. "Shadows that do not forgive." When the envoys gathered once more on their ship, their stories formed a terrible tapestry, pieces that did not fit perfectly, yet together painted a truth none of them wanted to face. Humanity was never alone. Something walked with them, unseen, unstoppable, and merciless. The report they sent to the council was filled with contradictions. The council wanted numbers, facts, proof, but all the envoys could provide were whispers, shadows, and broken minds. Still, the High Speaker read their words with grave attention. For even rumors carry weight when they repeat across galaxies. As the envoys departed Korthal Station, Serath gazed into the void through the observation deck. The stars shone cold and silent. Yet he could not shake the feeling that the stories were true. He wondered what force walked beside humanity, and whether it was born from humans themselves or from something far older. Perhaps the humans knew, or perhaps they too walked in ignorance. Shielded by guardians they did not understand. The ship sailed into the endless night, carrying questions heavier than before. Every answer they found only birthed 100 new mysteries. Every whisper only deepened the fear. The void held its secrets close, but one truth had already settled deep into the hearts of the envoys. Those who dared to strike at humanity did not face humans alone. They faced the void itself, and the void never lost. The forbidden records, the whispers of the void, had shaken the envoys. But whispers alone could not satisfy the Galactic Council. When the report reached the High Speaker, the chamber erupted once more. Some dismissed the stories as the hallucinations of drunk pirates and mad smugglers. Others claimed that rumors carried weight when they were repeated across centuries. The debate raged, but in the end, the council reached a decision that none dared take lightly. They would open the forbidden records. The forbidden records were not kept in any ordinary archive. They were buried deep beneath the council's central world, hidden in vaults carved into the heart of the planet, guarded by silence and secrecy older than most empires. Few even knew of their existence, and fewer still had walked their halls, for these records were not histories meant for the public. They were the fragments of truths too dangerous to be shared. Accounts of wars so terrible that entire species had erased their own memories of them. The High Speaker summoned Serath and the other envoys, commanding them to descend into the vault and study what was hidden. The scholar's heart raced as he entered the massive gates. The air inside was heavy with dust and the weight of centuries. Crystals stored ancient data, and stone tablets from forgotten empires lined the shelves. In the silence of the vault, every step echoed like thunder. Serath's hands shook as he activated one of the data crystals. Images burst into view, flickering like ghosts across the chamber walls. He saw ancient fleets burning in the void, alien armadas shattering under firepower that could not be explained. He saw the ruins of worlds where once great civilizations had thrived, their cities now dust, their names erased from memory. And among the fragments, one name appeared again and again: humans. The earliest records spoke of encounters thousands of years old. Long before the Council had even been formed, empires of unimaginable size had risen then, their fleets spanning hundreds of systems. They had sought conquest as all empires do, and they had turned their gaze upon humanity, expecting swift and easy victory. But every account ended the same: defeat, sudden and total. One record described the Tsar Dominion, an empire that had enslaved dozens of species. When they turned their armies on humans, the war lasted only weeks. Their fleets vanished without trace, their armies scattered, and within a single generation the Tsar were extinct. Another record spoke of the Lauren Hive, a species of relentless predators that devoured everything in their path. They too had attacked humanity, and yet their final entries were filled with madness. Soldiers raving of shadows, of voices in the dark, of battles fought against enemies they could not see. The more Serath read, the more his fear grew. These were not simple defeats. They were exterminations. Entire empires wiped away as though they had never existed. Yet there was no sign of human expansion in those times. Humans did not conquer the ruins left behind. They did not take new worlds or enslave survivors. Instead, they vanished again into obscurity, living quietly as though nothing had happened. The Veyri warrior spat in disbelief as he read the records. "These are lies," he snarled. "Propaganda from forgotten ages. Humans cannot destroy empires like this. They do not have the fleets. They do not have the weapons." But even as he shouted, his voice carried unease, for he too could see the pattern written across centuries. The Kerai diplomat's feathers shook as she whispered, "If this is true, then the humans are not protected by others. They are the ones who end wars. They are the hand that silences empires." Her words echoed in the vault, and the silence that followed was heavier than any wall. But Serath noticed something else, something even more disturbing. The records were incomplete. Every time the story turned to the final battle, the crystal data cut off, whole sections missing as though erased deliberately. The stone tablets were chipped, words carved away, histories broken. It was as if someone, or something, had tried to bury the truth. Why were the records destroyed? Who would want the galaxy to forget? Was it the Council itself, fearful of what they had once learned? Or was it the humans, erasing the past to keep their secret hidden? As the envoys left the vault, the High Speaker remained behind, staring into the dark where the crystals still glowed faintly. His stone-like skin seemed older than before, and in his silence he remembered a truth he dared not speak. He had lived long enough to see hints of these events, to hear whispers passed down through generations. He knew that humanity's history was not only written in blood, but in silence, silence deeper than the void, silence that consumed even memory. When the envoys presented their findings to the Council, the chamber was filled with unrest. Some argued that humans were a myth magnified by fear. Others claimed the erased histories were proof that humanity's true nature was too terrible to face. The Council could not agree, and so once more they pushed the burden onto the envoys, commanding them to continue their search, to leave the Council world and return to the galaxy. To dig deeper, as they prepared their ship, Serath felt the weight of the records pressing upon him. The images of ruined fleets and empty empires haunted his mind. Every erased word seemed louder than the words that remained. He began to suspect that humanity's secret was not simply protection, but destruction, not the shield, but the sword. And yet the strangest truth of all was that humanity seemed unaware, living as though they were ordinary, laughing, singing, building, never boasting of the terror their name inspired. The ship rose from the council world and slipped into the stars once more. Their mission had not ended. It had only grown darker. For if whispers of the void had shaken them, the forbidden records had broken them. And now the only question that remained was whether they had the courage to uncover what had been buried so carefully. Beyond the hull of their vessel, the galaxy stretched endless and silent. Yet, Serath could not escape the thought that silence itself was the answer. For perhaps the reason humans were never attacked was because the galaxy itself remembered. Even if its people had forgotten, the stars had not. The council chambers grew restless with each new report. Whispers had turned into fear, and fear had grown into frustration. The forbidden records had offered fragments, but no certainty. Some counselors demanded that action be taken, that proof be brought back in undeniable form. They could not rely on ancient ghosts and broken stories. They needed to see humanity tested in the present, in a way that no rumor or myth could excuse. It was in this atmosphere of tension that the council formed its most dangerous plan. They would arrange a controlled strike against humanity, not with their own fleets, for they feared political scandal if such an act was exposed. Instead, they hired mercenaries, ruthless soldiers of fortune who owed allegiance to no flag. These killers were promised wealth beyond measure if they succeeded. The task was simple on paper, but deadly in truth. They were to ambush a human vessel in deep space and report back what they found. The chosen target was a small transport ship, a civilian freighter traveling alone across the quiet stretch between colonies. It carried no fleet escort, no heavy weapons, only a handful of crew and their cargo of supplies. On the surface, it looked like easy prey. The mercenaries assembled in hidden orbit, their fleet numbering more than 20 ships. Each vessel bristled with weapons, hardened by years of raiding weaker worlds. They laughed and sharpened their blades, confident that the humans were nothing but flesh waiting to be harvested. The envoys, hidden aboard a disguised observation craft, watched with growing unease. Serath sat at the data console, his 4 eyes locked on the human freighter. He felt a weight pressing on his chest, as though he already knew the outcome but dared not speak it aloud. The Vera warrior stood ready, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade, eager to finally see proof that humans bled like all others. The Karai diplomat's feathers trembled, her golden wings folded tight as she whispered prayers to the stars. The ambush began without warning. The mercenary fleet surged forward, weapons primed. Targeting locks glowing across their consoles, alarms screamed within the freighter, its crew scrambling in panic, yet instead of firing, the human captain's voice came calmly across the void. "This is the freighter, Dawn's Light. Unidentified vessels, you are entering restricted lanes. State your intent." His words were steady, lacking fear, as though he were speaking to neighbors instead of predators. The mercenaries jeered at the message. They fired a warning barrage, plasma rounds streaking across the darkness. The freighter shook under the near miss, hull plating scorched but not broken. Still, the humans did not return fire. Their voices remained calm. "We request peaceful passage," the captain repeated. The mercenaries prepared their final strike, ships closing in, targeting the freighter's engines. But before the order could be given, the void itself seemed to change. At first it was subtle. The lights on the mercenary ships flickered. Sensors crackled with static. Navigational systems went blind, then it spread. Shadows rippling across the stars, vast and shapeless forms that stretched too large to be real. Some appeared like wings, some like claws, others like empty faces pressed against the glass of the void. Panic erupted among the mercenary crews. One captain shouted that he saw an arm wrapping around his ship. Another screamed that something had entered his bridge, though no alarms had sounded. Across the fleet, weapons misfired. Engines stalled. Men and women cried out in terror. Some clawed at their own eyes. Others collapsed where they stood. Within minutes, chaos consumed the entire fleet. The envoy's ship trembled as their sensors went wild. Serath clutched the console, his breathing heavy. His data feeds recorded energy spikes beyond known science, readings that made no sense. The Vera warrior, proud and fearless, stood frozen. His blade trembling in his hand, the Kerai diplomat sobbed, whispering, "They are not alone. They are never alone." And then silence. When the static cleared, the mercenary fleet was gone, not destroyed in battle, not scattered into retreat, but gone. Where 20 ships had filled the void, now only drifting debris remained. Torn metal and frozen bodies floating aimlessly. No distress calls, no survivors, no trace of a fight. The freighter, Dawn's Light, continued its path as if nothing had happened, its engines humming softly as it slipped back into hyperspace, its crew alive, unharmed, untouched. The envoys sat in silence, unable to speak. Serath's hands shook as he replayed the recordings again and again. But the data could not explain what had happened. The sensors showed shadows where no light existed, signals of vast forms where no ships had been. His mind screamed that it was impossible, yet his eyes confirmed it was true. The Vera warrior collapsed into his chair, sweat dripping down his scaled face. His voice broke as he muttered, "It was not a battle, it was judgment." The council received the report with grim silence. Some denied it, claiming the mercenaries had sabotaged themselves. Others demanded the recordings be destroyed before panic spread across the stars. But the truth could not be erased, not completely. The images of shadows moving across the void, the mercenary screams, the sudden silence, all of it burned into the minds of those who had seen it. Serath wrote his own private entry in his journal, his words trembling across the screen. The humans did not fight. They did not resist. They did not need to. Something else stood with them. Something unseen, unstoppable, and merciless. The mercenaries never had a chance, for when you raise your hand against humanity, it is not only humans you face, it is the void itself. And as he closed the journal, Serath felt a new fear take root in his heart, not of humanity, but of what might one day happen if that force ever turned against the galaxy itself. For if humans could walk untouched through the fire of war, it meant that the fire was theirs to command. The truth emerges. The mercenary fleet had vanished into silence, leaving only debris and unanswered questions drifting in the endless void. When the envoys returned to the council with their report, the chamber shook with anger and fear. Some shouted that the recordings were false. Others demanded war against humans before their secret weapon could be unleashed on the galaxy. But beneath the noise, there was a deeper truth gnawing at every heart present. They were not angry because they disbelieved. They were angry because they believed. The high speaker silenced the uproar with the thunder of his staff. His voice was low, heavy, carrying the weight of ages. We sought truth, and truth has been delivered to us. Humans are not protected by chance, nor by technology. They are protected by something we cannot explain, something older, darker, and stronger than our empires. His words fell over the chamber like cold ash. The envoys were summoned to testify before the full council. Serath stood first, his 4 eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling from nights without sleep. He described everything they had witnessed, the shadows, the screams, the silence. His voice broke when he spoke of the mercenary ships. They did not die in battle, he whispered. They were unmade, stripped of everything, left as echoes in the void. The Vera warrior, once so certain of human weakness, could not even lift his head. His voice was cracked when he spoke. I have fought in 100 wars. I have faced beasts with teeth like blades and armies without fear. Yet what I saw with humans was not war, it was judgment. It was as though the void itself reached out and tore their enemies apart. His words left the chamber heavy with dread. The Kerai diplomat spoke last. Her golden feathers had dulled with despair, her eyes hollow. I prayed when I saw it, she admitted, but I do not know to whom I prayed, for I realized then that humans are never alone, not in the dark, not in the fire, not even in silence. Something walks with them. Something listens to their voices. Something answers when they are threatened, and it is not mercy that answers. The council chamber descended into hushed panic. For the first time in centuries, the great rulers of empires felt powerless. They had built fleets that could destroy worlds. They had crushed rebellions and silenced uprisings. Yet none of that meant anything against shadows that could not be measured, against forces that could not be named, against a truth that tore apart ships without firing a single shot. But the truth did not remain confined to the council. Secrets have a way of leaking into the cracks of power. Rumors spread across the stars faster than fleets. In taverns and markets, in hangars and battlefields, whispers grew. The humans are not alone, some said. They walk with the void. Others answered. Mercenaries refused contracts against human colonies. Pirates turned their ships away at the sight of a human flag. Even warlords who had sworn never to bend their knees began issuing new orders. Stay away from human space. Back aboard the envoy's ship, Sarath sat alone in his quarters. His journal was filled with questions that had no answers. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shadows again, vast and shifting. Too large for the mind to hold, he thought of the ancient records, of the vanished empires, and he wondered how many others had been silenced by the same unseen force. Were humans even aware of what followed them? Or were they too blind to see the guardians that walked in their wake? The Vera warrior grew restless. His pride was shattered, his spirit broken. He spoke of challenging humans face to face, to see with his own eyes if a single blade could cut their flesh. But even as he spoke, his hands trembled, his voice faltered, for he knew deep inside that it was not the flesh of humans he feared, but what would rise if that flesh was harmed. The Kirai diplomat became quiet. Her prayers grew longer each night. She whispered to the stars for guidance, begging to know if humanity was blessed or cursed. Were the shadows guardians sent to protect them, or monsters chained to their destiny? She did not know, and that uncertainty was worse than any answer. One evening, as their ship drifted between systems, a distress signal reached them. It was faint, broken, coming from a damaged vessel adrift in the void. Against their better judgment, the envoys responded. They found a lone survivor inside, a mercenary from the fleet that had been destroyed. His body was scarred, his mind shattered. His eyes stared wide as though they still saw something moving in the dark. When Sarath questioned him, the survivor wept like a child. His voice shook, his words broken. "They were not human," he whispered. "We fired at humans, but something else came. They stood in the shadows, tall, endless, their eyes burning like fire. They did not touch us with weapons. They touched us with fear, and fear killed us." He clawed at his own skin as though trying to rip away the memory. His last words before collapsing into silence were burned into Sarath's mind. "When you strike at a human, you strike at the void, and the void strikes back." The survivor died before they reached port. His body gave way as though his spirit had long since departed. Sarath buried him with trembling hands, whispering a prayer he did not believe in. For though he pitied the man, his words had only deepened the terror already in Sarath's heart. When the council heard of the survivor's confession, the chamber fell into silence once again. This time no one argued, no one mocked, for the truth had emerged at last. Not the full truth, perhaps. Not one that could be measured or written in law, but enough to make even the proudest rulers lower their eyes. The truth was simple. Humans were never alone, and no one dared test what walked beside them. The revelation that changed everything, the council chamber, once a place of arrogance and endless debate, now sat in heavy silence. The great rulers of empires who once shouted with pride and thunderous voices now lowered their eyes. The truth had emerged piece by piece, and though it was never written in full, the shape of it was now undeniable. The galaxy finally understood why no one dared to strike at humanity. It was not because of fleets or weapons. It was not because of treaties or allies. It was because of what walked unseen beside them. For weeks, the council had argued over what to do next. Some had demanded to keep pushing, to gather more evidence, to uncover every hidden record and corner of truth. Others had begged to bury it all again, to let the secret fade as it had before. But no one dared propose war. Not anymore. Not after the whispers, the shadows, the screams of the mercenary fleet. The galaxy had waged countless wars, but never before had they faced an enemy that could not be touched. Never before had they faced fear itself. The High Speaker rose at last, his voice like grinding stone. "We are rulers of empires. But even rulers must know when to bow," he declared. "Humanity is not to be touched. Their path is not ours to interfere with. We must spread this law quietly but firmly. Never strike at humanity, never provoke them. Let their mystery remain unchallenged, for in the mystery lies survival." His words echoed across the chamber, and no one dared object. The envoys who had risked everything to uncover the truth were left in silence. Serath the scholar sat alone at his console that night, his eyes staring into the endless sea of stars beyond the window. His journal lay open, filled with his trembling notes. Yet, when he lifted his hand to write the final entry, he hesitated. For how could he put into words what he had seen? How could he describe shadows that had no form, eyes that burned without light, silence that roared louder than thunder? In the end, he wrote only one sentence. "When you harm a human, the universe itself rises to answer." The Vera warrior who once scoffed at weakness now carried a haunted look in his eyes. His people valued strength above all, yet he had witnessed a strength that did not swing blades or fire cannons. It was a strength that came from the unseen, the unknowable, and it had broken his pride. He spoke little after the mission, and when asked of humans he answered only with one word. Untouchable, the Karai diplomat, whose feathers once glowed with pride, had become quiet and contemplative. She prayed longer each night, though she confessed she no longer knew to whom she prayed. She spoke of humans with reverence, not as conquerors or as rulers, but as beings chosen by forces beyond comprehension. "They are never alone," she whispered whenever asked, "and that is their greatest strength." Rumors spread beyond the council chambers like fire in dry grass. Fleets carried the whispers to distant colonies. Merchants carried them through trade routes. Soldiers carried them back from the front lines. Soon, the entire galaxy knew what the council had discovered. Not in official words, not in records, but in quiet. Fearful whispers passed from one tongue to another. Never attack humans, for they walk with shadows. Pirates changed their paths. Mercenaries refused contracts. Warlords shifted their territories. Even empires that had never feared anyone adjusted their strategies. Humanity became a silent law across the stars, a law written not in treaties but in fear. Not even the boldest dared to break it. For none wished to share the fate of the mercenaries who had vanished without a scream. Yet humanity itself remained unchanged. On their colonies, children laughed in open fields. Workers built ships and cities. Farmers tended crops under alien suns. Soldiers patrolled their skies with steady discipline, never knowing the true terror their name carried in distant worlds. To them, life was ordinary. They did not see the shadows walking with them. They did not hear the silence that roared in their defense. They only lived, and that was enough. But the galaxy watched them now with new eyes. Some looked with fear, wondering if the humans would one day unleash their unseen allies against the stars. Others looked with awe, seeing in them a mystery that could never be tamed. Still, others wondered if the humans themselves were blind to their gift, if they truly understood what power followed them, or if they too were only children watched by giants they could not see. In the end, the council sealed the forbidden records once more, burying them deeper than before. This time, however, it was not an attempt to erase the truth, but to protect the galaxy from it. Some truths were too heavy for minds to carry, too dark for hearts to endure. The High Speaker left the chamber with a final warning carved into law, though it was never spoken aloud to the public. Do not touch humanity. Do not test the shadows, for they do not forgive. And so it was that the greatest revelation in the history of the galaxy was not shouted, not recorded, but whispered. Whispered so softly that it became stronger than any law. The revelation did not make humanity conquerors. It made them untouchable. Untouchable not by power they wielded, but by what the universe itself seemed to gift them. Serath closed his journal for the final time. His eyes burned with exhaustion, yet a strange calm settled in his heart. He no longer searched for answers, for he had realized that some mysteries were not meant to be solved. Some mysteries existed only to be feared, he whispered to himself as the ship sailed into the dark. The galaxy will never understand, but it will remember. It will remember the silence, the shadows, and the truth that left us speechless. And the stars, cold and ancient, seemed to listen, for though countless voices spoke across the void, one truth now bound them all. Humanity was never alone, and never would be.